Welcome back to the Empower podcast. My name is Blane, sustainability architect here at Empower, and I'm joined here with Alke. And today we'll be speaking with Richard, CEO of Casa Real, and Wolf, the founder of Easy Housing. We'll be discussing the recent sustainable and affordable homes built in Beira, Mozambique. So explore all the different angles around that. But to start us off, we'll do an introduction and then we can go from there. So perhaps Richard, would you like to start with a quick introduction and then we'll go on to you, Wolf?
My name is Richard Bahumwire, the CEO and co-founder of Casa Real in Mozambique, a company that is building affordable housing together in partnership with different people or different organizations like Empower, Easy Housing, and Real. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. So I'll take it over. I'm Wolf. I'm the founder of Easy Housing, and we are a sustainable, affordable housing solution based on timber, and we adopt circular and bio-based building principles and focus on emerging economies. And we have realized the pilots together with Casa Real and Richard in Beira last month.
Awesome.
Good to be here.
Perhaps to start us off, we can maybe begin with getting a bit of context around this recent project. Would one of you like to just talk about what has actually happened? What were the deliverables and who were some of the people involved in that process maybe? And then we can dive into the details from there.
So recently we started collaboration with Easy Housing and Empower, but not that alone. We had some works on eco building with Empower, specifically on the 2 units, which we had some discussion before. And after that, we built on that to also integrate the eco housing again with Easy Housing. And who was involved was Casa Real, the local team, and Easy Housing, Wolf, who is there, who is going to be telling us the experience he went through to make sure that we build the 2 units that we have concluded. And that's it.
Thank you, Richard. Wolf, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, just to supplement Richard. So Easy Housing has been building 2 eco homes, timber homes in our concept by means of the funding that Empower raised through the Carbano community, through the Catalyst funding. So that was a great opportunity for us to collaborate with Empower and with Casa Real and to actually start building those the showcase in Beira, Mozambique, in November, December of last year. And it was a pleasure to work together, and I think it's nice to elaborate today a bit on the experiences and the future opportunities and why we think that circular and bio-based construction is important also in this specific situation. So looking forward to the discussions.
Wolf, you have quite an innovative construction. Right? Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about the construction that Easy Housing is trying to bring forward in Africa, starting with this project in Beira?
Yes, absolutely. Easy Housing has developed a building concept that's based on sustainably sourced timber. So basically, we are a timber frame housing concept. Timber framing in itself is not new, but the way we approach it implies that we have a strong focus on local value chains. So that means partnerships with the local building companies and within partnerships throughout the building value chain in the target markets. And in addition, we adopt circular economy design principles as well as passive house design principles. So that means that the houses are sustainable on a lot of different levels. And well, in a broader context, I think what we see a lot in the last years is the discussion on bio-based building materials and building concepts, as opposed to traditional building materials in concrete. And of course, since we've invented concrete since we've adopted concrete building on a large level around 100 years ago, we've seen a strong focus on cement and concrete building. And now in recent years, with the increasing awareness on the impact of the cement industry and the steel industry on both carbon footprint as well as waste and mineral extraction, we are starting to realize that we have to transition to bio-based and sustainable building methods, which won't mean that concrete will be phased out immediately, but we will see a strong transition in the mix of building approaches, building concepts in the coming decade, which will transition towards bio-based building concepts, because we have to, if we want to reach our climate and environmental targets. So I think that's also where Easy Housing taps into. We've integrated these sustainability aspects and have tried, on the other hand, to tune the concept to emerging markets like Mozambique, where the approach towards building is very different from a country like the Netherlands, where I'm based at the moment. So we've tried to create a concept that works with the building value chains in Mozambique and with the local infrastructure, as well as with which sustainable materials are available in local markets. Well, that was already a lot of information, but that's the context. Yes.
But useful. I was wondering, Richard, so because I like the fact, Wolf, that you're actually using localized value chains now. Richard, was it for your team, it was completely different to build this kind of a construction, right? Was it difficult? Yeah. How did the team respond? How was it for you?
First of all, when we had this, we thought it's something really that it's an opportunity to tap into new technologies, new ways of doing things. Of course, as a concept, as Wolf was talking about, as to Casa Real is always a pleasure getting to learn things, to look into sustainability, looking into innovations and the like. So when we first heard about this concept a few months ago, we thought this is another great thing that we can start integrating into Casa Real's buildings, like we did with the Australian team that came to help us to do resilient roofs after Cyclone Idai. So we thought that this is another advantage, first of all. Secondly, usually our team is always ready to learn, and we have a very brilliant team. Wolf can testify to this. We have very good carpenters that when he started with them, I thought he's going to have difficulties, especially them not being used to building houses with wood. But I think he can tell us that they were very fast in learning and integrating the concept into getting the house done actually before the deadline we had planned the house to be completed by the team. They ended up completing earlier than that.
How long did it take you guys to build this construction, this new construction in total? Wolf?
I think it took like 5 weeks, and I was just confirming to Richard that the team did an excellent job. The carpentry team of Casa Real was very skilled and very able and eager.
You were frozen for a bit. Was that 5 weeks? You said you mentioned 5 weeks for the total construction, right?
Well, 5 weeks for the rough builds, basically. So 5 weeks until we got to the point that the construction was I don't know if the English term is correct, but in Dutch we call it winter.
Habitable.
Sorry?
Habitable.
Habitable. Well, yeah, and I mean, the paint works are still going on at the moment, but it took us 5 weeks to get the construction to the point that it's wind and water tight, and that it's the window frames are in, and that basically maybe if we had not had the Christmas break in between, it would have been 6 to 7 weeks if you count the paintworks and the last steps of finishing with it. So basically, within 2 months, we did the entire construction. Which I think was a very good result, considering the fact that it was the first time that we worked in this constellation with, for me, all kinds of new partners and suppliers. I still had to explain the building concepts to the teams on site, and yeah, I think that went without any noticeable problems. So that was a big success in itself. And that's also for a large extent thanks to the part of thanks to the skilled team of Casa Real, and the fact that they have a very experienced on-ground team for both site works as well as the carpentry team and so on. We had a good working carpentry workshop in at Young Africa. That's a capacity building NGO, not so far from the Casa Real building site, where the carpenters of Casa Real and Levashore were doing the timber framing of the houses. So we had good facilities, we had good teams, and yeah, that was part of this success for building the showcase. But in general, I think timber framing and the easy housing concept allows for quick speed of construction cycles.
Yeah, the turnaround time is, oh, sorry, Richard, you go.
And I think what was key is when he was coming, we thought that we would have difficulties in getting local materials locally, which is critical. That when you want to do affordable housing, actually you need to ensure that you are getting materials locally, because that gives you scale, it gives you provision for the cost, and it helps you when you are planning to go into scale, because the supply value chain is key in affordable housing. And if you are getting materials like we had planned with him, that he will be getting materials from the Netherlands, then I think then that becomes a different context. But when we got the chance that we have a sustainable forest manager that is providing timber and also the cocktails and other materials. I think he brought some of the few materials from the Netherlands, which he had already bought to coming, but the supply chain, we at least found that it is within the local means. And this helped us to really beat time and also beat the cost that we had planned.
Maybe just to expand on that for those who are maybe learning about what you guys are doing for the first time, what does that supply chain look like for this sort of construction? So obviously there needs to be timber involved in that chain somewhere. What are some of the other aspects of that local supply chain that would be needed for this sort of a building?
Yeah, that's a good question, Blane. Well, first of all, it is the timber, of course, because the timber is in terms of volume and weight, it's the most important material, and it's also the crucial ingredient for our concept, right? Because the timber substitutes cement and steel, basically. So what we do when we enter a new market like Mozambique, we look at which sustainable forestry companies are around, basically. So we do that in a couple of ways. But for example, the FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council's building or search index allows you to look for certified forestry companies in a country or in a region. And in this case, we got in touch through our network with Levashore, which is based in the province of Beira, and with Pedra Apeda, which is a coconut timber company that uses old coconut plantations for sustainable timber production. but also Lavage Floor, which is a very unique forestry company. In fact, it's managing natural forest instead of plantation forests, and it has a FSC certification. So we identified those partners, and then Easy Housing approaches the partners to see what's available in their local supply chain, which types of timber, which dimensions, which treatments, which specifications, and so on. And we make sure that it is in line with our sustainability and quality criteria. So that also means that, well, for the sustainability criteria, the FSC certification is an important parameter, but also, for example, for quality, when you build houses with timber, it's important that you use treated wood, so that's CCA treated, so that termites and molds and other types of threats for the timber are not do not get a chance. So that ensures the lifespan of the timber construction for centuries. Well, through this sustainability and quality assessment and identifying those partners, we establish the local value chains, and then we sign a letter of intent with these partners to arrange to also ensure the agreements we make in terms of sustainability and quality. And then we go from there. So Lavage Floor and Pedra supply the timber for the houses in Beira. Yeah, this is actually it's a scalable model which we can do across markets. So in Uganda, we are taking the same approach with different forestry companies, but which also have FSC certification and adequate skill and capacity. Yeah, so that's how we go about, basically.
Yeah.
So, basically, Wolf, you're saying that the value chain we're talking about is, first of all, it needs to be a sustainable forest, and preferably FSC certified, or right, and then it goes from that into someone who will be cutting the wood towards the construction that Easy Housing is trying to build. And then afterwards, it will go directly into a team of constructors building the houses, right? It's a very short value chain, is it?
Yeah, that's true. So the value chain is basically that the timber supplier will supply the treated timber directly to the carpentry workshop, which is a very basic workshop. You don't need a factory. It's basically just a covered workspace with some simple machinery, because the forester will supply the timber already in the right dimensions and quantities, and it will be treated and planed. And if it's possible, it will already even be cut into the right lengths. So basically, once it reaches the carpentry workshop and the carpentry team, they can directly start framing the timber frames. And then you can do the framing in the workshop, but that workshop can also be on site, or you can do it off site and put the frames on a truck. So that's how we did it in Beira. The workshop was a couple of kilometers away from the building site. We did the framing, we did a lot of the assembly off site, and we put them on trucks. You can lift them manually, so you don't need lifting machinery or equipment. And then once they reach site, they can be positioned and screwed together by the building team, which took around 1 day. So basically, you call it timber framing, and also like the prefabrication aspects allows you to screw everything together within a couple of hours or within a day on site. Yeah. So you have a very short supply chain and a very fast one, but also important to mention is it's very lean. It's easy to set up in new locations. It's very scalable. You don't need a lot of capital expenditure to get going. So those are all like important aspects of which come next to sustainability, which also facilitate the commercial success of timber construction. because sustainability in itself, of course, is important, but it also has to be competitive for concepts to work in local markets. Otherwise, yeah, it won't be picked up.
Yeah, that's what I like actually about the whole concept, is that so basically the framing, you're talking about almost some sort of a prefab at not factory, but where the wood was cut, right, and treated. And what I'm wondering is, so you have a value chain which can be, it's almost entirely local. So it's scalable, plus it's affordable, as long as the wood is affordable, right?
Yes.
What would be the biggest challenge, Richard, you think, for market adoption in Beira of such a construction?
Yeah, big one. The big one is a big challenge because normally they have culture beliefs around, or perceptions around wooden housing. Although this is treated timber, people still regard it as timber, so they don't care it's treated. The first thing is that they believe that a strong house is a concrete house, is a block house. They have had some series of cyclone had since 2019, where 90% of the roofs were destroyed and the houses were damaged by Cyclone Idai. Since that time, it's been a big problem getting quality and resilient, affordable homes. And this kind of group of low-income people believe that a house constructed with timber is not a strong one, is not sustainable. So the biggest challenge is now Casa Real to start demonstrating that shift, especially now we are expecting cyclone on 22nd this month. It has been communicated by the government. So 22nd this month, we will start testing Wolf's technology with the cyclone. It's not a huge one, but whatever cyclone that passes destroys houses, and that becomes a communication that then we need to start telling people that, look, this is a strong house, this is a strong house. But generally, it's like when you're buying a clothes. Normally, when it's a new product in the market, people have questions about that product. Is a dress, is food, is whatever, is a new car, is iPhone, or any new product that comes to the market. Usually, people tend to think otherwise. Okay, I'm using it to this. I need to first get to understand how this works. So it's going to be a journey of testing the market and also getting their feedback about that, which we are yet to do and to see.
Absolutely, Richard. I think for electric cars, you see the same challenges. I think people, when electric vehicles were introduced or coming up, people were very skeptical about all kinds of technical aspects and of course the price. But for timber housing, of course, timber housing has been around for a long time, but nowadays with good technical details, you can construct timber houses that last for centuries. And in fact, timber houses have been around for centuries already. So it's more like a matter of sensitization and awareness creation than real technical challenges. But that aside, I think it's a very important point you mentioned. We have to gather the feedback that was also a part of building the showcase together. Is that we get people to live in the houses in the low middle income target group as well, and see how they respond, what they like, what they do not like, how we can improve the concept and the communication around the concept. I think those are crucial steps forward for getting people to live in timber housing, like in the not only the early adopters, but the middle of I forgot the term, but yeah.
Middle income, you mean?
Yeah, the middle group of people, not the early adopters, but the general public.
I think it's going to be exciting. So coming from the Netherlands, we have water gates here, which are over centuries old and still functional. So I think that wood has a potential, as indeed, as Wolf is saying, the constructions can be as strong and sometimes even stronger because they have more flexibility also when it comes to natural circumstances.
Yeah, I think what we've just been talking about the awareness and this being a challenge is quite an important detail, because obviously with Empower, our grand vision is to design solutions that are affordable and sustainable housing solutions that are ultimately scalable. And often we can come up with solutions that are, work best in theory, but sometimes there are challenges that make it difficult to implement that in practice. And one of those challenges could be around, having timber as a new style of home that people aren't used to, and because of that there may be a bit of friction because it's a new thing, and that's a natural human response. But then that doesn't mean that it's not a bad solution. It just means that there needs to be awareness and education around this as a viable alternative. And it's exciting for us that we're currently in that transition, and it'll be cool to see this play out because there's a lot of value to be gained through something like this.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's really cool that this Catalyst project and the showcase is testing this real life. I think it's one of the best opportunities we have in this collaboration to test innovative, sustainable concepts on the ground with real life customer feedback coming from the actual target market. Because for me, I'm very excited about this because in the Netherlands I've been building timber houses for the last 7 years with my company over here. But usually we're also the early adopters, and now in the Netherlands you finally see this trend towards timber becoming mainstream, and all the big building companies are adopting timber construction as the new normal, so to say. But of course, this was also something that was only perceived as something for eco-friendly people, whatsoever. In the last decades, and now you finally see the transition, and I'm really keen to see how the market adoption will be in a country like Mozambique, because obviously that's essential for making an impact in the construction sector. Is that people in emerging economies are embracing timber construction and other innovative building technologies that are environmentally friendly and safe, because that's where the big impact is to be made. If you look at the housing deficit or the building backlog in the coming decades, I think we have to build 300 million homes up till 2030, and the vast majority of the 300 million homes will be on the African continent, I think, or maybe Africa, Southeast Asia. That's where the big impact can be made. So it's really exciting to see, the response, to have this showcase in Mozambique, and take it from there.
I think one thing I'd like to touch on before we wrap things up is what we've just been talking about there with the scalability, but with your specific philosophy with easy housing, and your approach and your strategy for scaling this sort of house, what are some of those aspects? So you talked about it before with it being a lean approach, meaning like maybe there's less components, less moving parts in certain aspects of it, and because there's less moving parts, that particular part is a scalable solution. What are some other, aspects of your approach that contribute it to being a scalable solution, if that makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. So when you look at scalability, you have to look at a lot of different aspects in the supply chain, in the value chain. So when you look at labor, of course, you have to look at the building speed, the building cycles. You have to look at infrastructure. So what works in the local context, what kind of infrastructure is available. And in countries like Mozambique, for example, there is not so much heavy lifting infrastructure, so you have to build lights. So when you are building off-site or building prefabrication, you have to make sure that it works with local equipment that's available. So maybe to zoom into these, of course, it starts with the supply chain capacity of sustainably sourced timber, and that means that you have to assess the volumes and the capacity of the timber company. So, for example, the forestry company in Mozambique has a capacity for thousands of houses per year. So that means that we can create a lot of skill and capacity through the existing supply chain. And of course, once you create the demand, the forestry sector will adjust its supply capacity and also increase the cover of forestry, the cover of plantations, etc., to make sure that the supply side of things can handle the demand. So the good thing is that when you start building in timber, the amount of forests will actually increase instead of decrease, because you increase the demand for sustainable forestry. So you'll create more forest cover. But the good thing is that there's already a lot of capacity in the existing supply chain. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that when you are doing the construction, what I just mentioned, you have to have a workshop or a carpentry workshop which allows for off-site construction. But because it's just timber framing, you don't need heavy machinery. You can basically just screw everything together with simple hand machines, battery equipment. And that means that you can also start prefabrication in parallel docking stations. So, for example, you have multiple carpentry teams working in tandem. One team is making floors, one team is making walls. So in that carpentry, you have a sort of a line of a production line. And that production line is something you can easily scale up. You can create parallel teams and you can scale up the amount of teams. So when you have big projects, like when you would have to construct several hundreds of houses, for example, in the resettlement projects in the north of Mozambique, you can easily do that. And the only thing you need is a roof structure. So it can be a very simple building, and carpentry teams. And of course, carpentry, there's plenty of carpenters. They usually only make the roof structure of houses. But the carpenters that are making the roof structures, such as the carpentry team that I work with at Casa Real, is skilled and perfectly equipped to be trained in prefabbing an entire timber house. You just have to do some capacity development, which took me like 1 or 2 weeks to teach circular building principles and to teach how to make the frames of easy housing in our specific technical details. But with a bit of training, you can easily train these carpenters to do the entire timber construction. So that's also a scalable aspect. When you look at labor, you don't have any curing times of concrete and so on and so forth. So once you've done the frames, you can put them on a truck and drive them to site, screw them together, and basically the house is done in a couple of days. So I think that's also good to mention, is that the frames, they are They're lightweight, so they can be carried with 4 people, both on the truck as on sites to put them together with the other frames to create the structure. Yeah, and then also that circular aspect of it allows for the prefabrication. It allows for quick assembly, but it also allows for incremental building, which I think is very important for emerging economies, because a lot of people actually want to build step by step. So once you have created the basic structure, when the family grows or when people have saved money for house expansion, they can easily screw apart a piece of the wall and add a couple of new timber components and increase the size of the house without having to do any demolition. So I think that's also a part of the scalability when you look at, you know, the lifespan of the house over the decades. Yeah.
Well,
So
scalability from the production side obviously does not appear to be a problem at this very moment, right? When I listen to, and then the scalability from the affordable side of it, the consumption side, because basically from Empower, we're looking at people financing. We're not a charity, we're not a government organization. So basically people have to buy the construction themselves, right, Richard, through a lease to buy. So what would be the affordability from the consumption side? Can you tell us a little bit about the pricing of the locally produced house? And also, Richard, for you, when it comes to the lease to buy, just to round off a little bit.
Yeah, in terms of pricing, I think the price of the showcase we built in Beira was slightly more expensive than the concrete brick baseline, but it was maybe like 10% more expensive. So, of course, when you look at the total price, including the externalities and the sustainability aspects, then it's already much cheaper, but there's still the reality of a small, like on a commercial level, a small price difference between traditional, and we expect to reduce that price gap through, first of all, scaling up the supply chain. And of course, this was the price in the pilot project, which is always more expensive than when you have consolidated the concept in the local value chain. And secondly, through the carbon impact we make, because we actually reduce 260% of carbon footprint compared to concrete construction, because on the one hand, we eliminate the footprint of using concrete, and on the other hand, we store carbon in the timber construction, so that 260% reduction in carbon can actually be monetized. And we are developing an approach for carbon credits for both the stored carbon in the construction, as well as the carbon offsets through substituting concrete with carbon neutral or even carbon negative building structure. So that carbon monetization can actually make a huge price impact, because we think we can actually create a 10% price discount for timber housing once we've achieved this carbon monetization in the coming years.
So basically, Wolf, you're saying that the norm now at this very moment, it's 10% higher than the construction costs of the way that Casa Real has been building their houses thus far, right? Which was at a very affordable price. But this 10% can be reduced once you start to adopt carbon credits and move to scale with the construction.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it would be the same price as the concrete. Then, Richard, I'm curious, because basically your clients will then have the choice. If you would compare the two of them, it would be to have a choice between a concrete building and the wooden construction, right?
So first of all, it was a nice question and observation to, okay, we are going to scale. What should people expect? What should people have in mind that going to scale, what will you need? I don't know if you are hearing me on my line. Yeah. So the biggest challenge for scale actually is not the supply. The biggest challenge for scale is who is buying those houses you are building, you are putting on the ground. So the supply chain, you can fix those. The technology, the construction, the team, it is engineering. You can do that because the staff is there, the team is there, the suppliers are there. But the biggest concern in scaling up a project of affordable housing is who is going to buy your house, who is going to give you back the money that you have invested, so you are able to recycle even that money itself. Is the biggest question that then we need to focus on. At this stage, for me, is a stage, very good one, where Easy Housing and Casa Real would be looking at communications, looking at changing the mentality, looking at really communicating and making marketing, doing marketing and much of the stuff to create the market for this type of housing. So once you get that fixed, then you can run. And at the moment, as of course with Empower, we are looking at rent to buy. But rent to buy also, you need the clients that would come to take up these houses for rent to buy, and then eventually, because of course rent to buy eventually means that the person has to buy. So it's a good step. It's what you need to generate as a market to make sure that you create a demand for the production, and then you can scale up.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. That's the most important step. And I think that might also be interesting because we might be able to develop financing solutions which favor environmental friendly concepts, like through green bonds of IFC, through EDGE Carbon Zero certification, maybe also through Empower, which might favor environmentally friendly construction methods over traditional methods. So I think in the end, it comes down to the cultural acceptance and the price competitiveness, of course. But suppose that you can get price competitiveness, then it's also about which access do you provide to people. Are people able to finance their house? If it's a circular bio-based home, maybe people have new financing options for these kinds of products, just like you have subsidies for electric vehicles, or policy that favors innovation in that sense. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how the market develops around that, next to the cultural acceptance.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because with the Empower platform and the financing, effectively it's, I guess, crowd funded with the community purchasing these NFT collections. And a lot of the so when the funding is from a collection of people, there could be interesting incentives around, okay, maybe this group of people would, pay a little bit extra or whatever in order to fund a home that fits this certain criteria, whether it be sustainability or otherwise. So yeah, it's quite interesting. It will be quite interesting how this plays out when the funding is not just from one entity, but from a collection of individuals, and what criteria of housing are they wanting to support, and getting that balance right from the NFT collectors / people funding the homes, and then ultimately the people on the ground that are purchasing these homes, getting that balance right. And what does that incentive structure look like? It's got to be a very I'm quite fascinated with that concept, because there's a lot of new features in this sort of funding model which just didn't exist before, which I think that's quite exciting, because I think inevitably will produce all these opportunities that we probably can't even anticipate at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think just a final remark on that side is that through decentralized funding with people that are actually funding from an impact perspective, whilst banks are providing mortgages with the risk and interest perspective only. So you get a whole new market dynamic. If you can untap that market, then there is also, like I just mentioned, policy, but it's not only government policy, but it's also financial policy from a decentralized market that's steering, financial innovation in the housing sector. It's going to be fascinating to see what that brings.
Yeah, exactly. Because traditional funding mechanisms would be driven primarily or incentivized primarily by the profit aspect. And I think that has X consequences. But when the funding mechanism is driven by not only profit incentives, but social impact incentives, environmental incentives, that's got to produce these other consequences or these other benefits that are just that wouldn't be possible in the traditional model. And yeah, again, it'll be exciting to see what that then leads to moving forward. But I think we're ticked over, I think, 45 minutes. Maybe if there's anything else people wanted to, any closing remarks that people wanted to finish on, but I think we'll definitely get on another podcast soon anyway. But any closing remarks from everyone?
No, I thought it was fascinating to hear from you guys how this was perceived. First of all, in building on the site, but also the new possibilities that arise from these opportunities in a decentralized, impact-driven, future, basically. So nice to have had you and the opportunity to chat a bit more extensively. Thanks.
Yeah, likewise. It was a pleasure, and of course, in a couple of months, we'll have the feedback of the inhabitants and the feedback of the hurricane resistance and so on. So I think it's nice to have another conversation on that in a couple of months too.
It would be nice. We didn't even mention that, Wolf, but you're going to do you are from Easy Housing together with Richard are going to do a first research around how it's perceived, right? And clients and
yeah, I think we will go to Beira in April and work together with Casa Real. Of course, Casa Real is going to try to find tenants in the coming weeks, inhabitants, whether it's buyers or renters. For us, it's very important to get that customer feedback and to do interviews with the local stakeholders and potential target audience. I think Casa Real has already started the conversation with people and stakeholders, so that's going to be a very interesting point in time where we have that feedback.
Now, of course, it is always a pleasure talking about affordable housing and how we are partnering with the Empower to make sure that people have access to affordable houses and live in better places is a good thing that I feel passionate about. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. It's awesome having you both on. You guys are doing awesome work with everything that you guys are doing. And I think the exciting thing is the crypto community is getting exposure to this stuff that is happening in the real world, which is exciting. Like it's almost these podcasts and Power, we're bridging these two worlds, and the crypto world is getting exposure to affordable housing, and conversely, people within that housing construction, more traditional space is maybe getting exposure to crypto, and it's ultimately both can feed off each other in a positive way. But yeah, thanks again for coming on to the podcast. We'll definitely have you guys on again. There's a few deep dives that I'd like to maybe explore in another podcast, but thanks again, and the listeners, big thank you to all of you as well. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll have links to Easy Housing and Casa Real down in the description as well. But thanks again, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.